Boy, but
Also, there's
Jason,
some
before you
echo
speak, is
with
anybody
somebody.
else hearing echoes? Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben, I think it might be you.
See, I muted Ben and the echo's gone.
Yeah, it's Ben.
There's an echo from me. Are you sure it's not just the cars?
No, it's Ben. Because you're not wearing headphones, so we can hear ourselves in
took them off
through your
because-
microphone.
Because my ear, it was hurting my ears. The
You're
volume.
just gonna have to suffer for the benefit of the
Work
the
through
good
the
of
pain.
the podcast, man.
Damn.
Well, you also
I'm still
have to
hearing that
use
echo.
them, though. Yeah.
Is it? Can you hear me now?
Well, we
Well,
could always hear you, man.
Okay, I don't remember what I was saying, so I'm just going to say nothing.
All right. Now we
So,
dealt with that echo.
another thing-
Apologies.
Another thing I find kind of interesting with and maybe this is jumping too far ahead, but the city states versus more like the nation state formations later on is I feel like with the city states, like the emergence of the state itself, like isn't seen. Like he makes a big point about how like the German nation state or like nation states, I guess there wasn't a unified, but anyways, like the nation states that emerged out of like Napoleon, there's like this notion, like there's this like feeling of almost the imposition of an alien power on them. Whereas I feel like these city states didn't quite have this, like the state itself wasn't seen as an alien power in the same way. And maybe I tripped or skipped over something where he does point to that, but that is kind of my sense.
He does.
of the difference between those.
I can't remember if it was in this chapter or the previous chapter, but I remember noting that, and I thought that was a really poignant note that he struck, where he made the point that in the formation of the national identity is it's intertwined with class conflict, where you have imperial occupation, where the foreign nation is what do you call it? Indistinct from the class oppressor, and you're able to tie class conflict neatly together with class unity against the foreign oppressor. This gets
Which
hidden.
was not the case with Poland.
It gets hidden, exactly. It gets hidden when there's when it's when you have the class conflict within a given nation. It's a lot easier to hide behind the nation rather than it being sort of manifest through the nation, the form of the nation.
Yeah, this is a concept that he talks about in this chapter. It's actually in the section called the Principle of Nationality. Right. And it's on page 146.
Yeah,
so I guess we'll get to that as we move forward through the text. Yeah. But it was a really good point.
I'm interested in this bit that is coming up right now in our reading. You didn't quite get here, Kevin, but about these city-states that are emerging from powerful brokers who are able to hire mercenary armies and basically found nominally little states. They're not founded on feudal legal title anymore, but just on, he says, undisguised exercise of brutal military force. And as such, the modern state initially had no natural borders.
Right.
I think that's...
Right. Thus emerged the innumerable small states of Italy, no longer founded on the feudal legal title, but on undisguised exercise of brutal military force. These tyrannies were veritable modern states, characterized not only by the subjugation of all citizens directly to the state, but also by the universality of the state's objectives, which were no longer limited to the mere safeguarding of peace, but now encompassed the methodical pursuit of a politics fostering the economic development of the citizenry, externally and internally.
I think that actually answers the question, or not the question, but the vague proposition I put up earlier, which is like, I mean, probably like 2 episodes ago now, but like, why did one form of the state end up winning out. And again, jumping forward a little bit and also jumping back on like the development of the nation, because the Italian city-state model was birthed through the city-state model. There aren't really these defined borders. And also the state as it exists is more of a administrative process that is just a continuation of the past city-state models.
Yeah.
But if you start to then conquer other city-states, then nationalism starts to develop so there's no way to actually like propagate capitalism within that kind of like mercantilist city-state model.
Which is what happened, right? This is what it goes on to say, that this subsequent fracturing into smaller and smaller states left this larger territory vulnerable to empires like Spain, France, and Austria.
Yeah. Is that when Machiavelli was writing? Was it during this time, or was it a little bit later?
I think so. That's a good question. Fuck. Need more materialists to teach philosophy. Because I was definitely taught Machiavelli in a class
15th
on
century.
1469 to 1527.
Philosophy of public policy.
Machiavelli is writing in the early 16th century.
Yeah, so you start to see this development of this, like Machiavellian, the violence that is necessary to like consolidate power, sort of thing, and this like, I don't know. I don't have too much more. I do know for the materialist thing with Machiavelli, I think the Althusserians are the only ones who really take up, because I think Gramsci took up Machiavelli somewhat, and then I know the Althusserians like have some stuff. I've read a little bit, because I will say like there is definitely the like kind of vulgar notion of Machiavelli that he's just like violence and cunning, but that's not really what's going on there. Like I think
not
it's
at
just
all, man.
He's just trying to be
entirely
Yeah,
malaligned. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly. If you actually read Machiavelli, even just you could take him out of any. Totally decontextualize him and actually read what he says, and the popular notion of what the word Machiavellian has come to mean just does not match at all what is actually contained in the text of what he wrote. He's just a realist, and he was actually just being very he was being very ethical, very high-minded about things. He was using persuasiveness and appealing to appealing to the writing letters to the prince, and appealing to the things that the prince would find appealing, and being like, oh yes, you're high and mighty and great and wonderful, and the best way to accrue power to yourself is to ensure the benefit of all. He was using things that would appeal to the prince by saying, let's seek peace and establish things that will actually benefit people, the wider public, and that sort of thing. He was being like a good he was being doing real politic.
So here's the problem, Kevin. You're talking about it as though there's something good that has happened already, and that's not true. All of history has only been bad. Even though we have an imagination we imagine something good, it's not based on anything that has happened. We imagine good things for the future because of materialism somehow.
And that's the true utopianism, is to recognize that everything heretofore has been
just garbage.
I would like to maintain that my Hegelian / Catholicism is more materialist than the average Marxists. I
don't think that's entirely wrong. I think there's an intersection of the I forget who said it, but it was like something about I'm gonna mangle it, but it's a crude materialism is right about 90% of the time. And I think that's true, and I think it's also and because of that, I think a lot of people get stuck at a crude materialism because they're like, I've unlocked the truth to the universe, and then they just stop there.
They only care about being correct.
Right.
Like it gets lost in like, well, how do you actually change it? They get obsessed like, well, I can understand the world and see this is why these things happen. It's the economics that you're ignoring, and it's this. But I mean, I think it's a failure to account for like subjectivity. But yeah, with Machiavelli, I think like it's important. Yeah, like we probably should move on from him. But like with him, like he was a Republican who was like his main concern was like the longevity. Like he wanted a stable state that could actually last. And like it's precisely in this, like you have these, emerging city states, which is this new form, but they are unstable. And it's easy for the empires and whatnot to sweep in, because there's this like, you know, this like fragmentation that comes along with it, that like I think he saw both like the potential and like was a little bit horrified with the instability that also came along with that like situation.
I agree.
And I do think, and once again, this might move us further forward than we should, but I think it's interesting to contrast like him versus Hobbes, because I know Hobbes has a very like he is definitely influenced by Machiavelli, but so when we move later, he makes a point to the emergence of the nation state has a lot to do with the need to create like a unified economic like territory that can actually compete with other like economic territories. But and I do think I believe this about Hobbes. I think Hobbes in himself is like in this early like developing capitalism in England, which is actually becoming the more dominant logic versus the state. He wants the unified state as almost a bulwark against, like, he's always terrified of like economic like unions and like stuff like that is undermining the unary like the unitary like power of the sovereign. But amusingly, there's almost this like dialectical reversal where in him defending the state as this unitary thing, it actually becomes better at like maintaining this like unified economic zone, which I think is just interesting. Let me see what else is in this first section.
To carry it forward where I stopped, in the case of the large nations of the West, it was linked with the organization of the feudal state. The supreme head of the feudal state, the monarchy, was able to invest the ancient legal institution of the national monarchy with new content. The monarchy, which was the head of the feudal state, was able to make the new means of commodity production serve royal interest, to subject the feudal lords to the authority of the state using a mercenary army and paid officials, and in this way to create on a large scale that which the Italian states represented on a small scale. In the same period as bourgeois development was providing the impetus for the emergence of the German state as a unit in a quite new sense, the German Empire disintegrated into a large number of independent states which were unconcerned with each other as long as they were not crossing swords. The same development which produced the unified nation state among the great nations in the West produced in Germany the division of the nation into states.
Which is going to be felt on into Marx's time and the sort of the struggle for Republican liberty and so forth.
I mean, the German state, or the national question of Germany, in one case, like in one sense or another, is like still, in fact, probably the defining characteristic of the defining question of our time, as like Germany becomes like the economic power of the is the economic power of the Eurozone. Both world wars have essentially this question as like a lingering factor behind it. Like, this is the question of the capitalist world order.
Yeah.
Right, because England is able to unify. I mean, unify includes, what it did to Ireland and Scotland.
Well, unify and subjugate are not necessarily mutually exclusive terms. The United Kingdom is a legitimate term. It's just that part of that unity is based upon forcing people into unity.
Right. And France is able to basically remain, from the feudal time onward, even after the revolution, remain a distinct entity.
Mm-hmm. That's the legacy of the absolutist, the Enlightenment. The thing that we mistake as feudal holdover is actually the beginning of capitalism. It's a pre-capitalist political form.
Mm-hmm.
But the monarchy and other institutions are able to write it further.
Yeah.
And all the specifics they give within France, it's interesting to look at he contrasts France and Germany, right? So there's something called the Great Provincial Dowry. It's quoting Dante, which basically subjects all the smaller duchies, except for a few, to absolute rule by the French king. So he absorbs basically their standing armies. And then there's like a civil service, a taxation. All of these things are implemented by the crown in distinct ways. And the Tea Perpetuale, a tax paid no longer for only a brief duration in times of war, but on a permanent basis.
Right, and I think he's drawing out here that national differences gave rise or to set the stage for different developments of capitalism, and one or the other was more or less suited to allowing for the rise of capitalism in its territories or not. So as the contrast between German and French development clearly shows, it was principally the difference in the distribution of power within the feudal state that ultimately decided whether the modern state united the nation as a single political community or split it into numerous independent territories. For in the case of the great European nations, the birth of the modern state was based on the fact that commodity production, which as capitalist commodity production increasingly becomes the general form of social production, provided the forces of the feudal state with the possibility of investing the ancient juridical and institutional form of the feudal state with a new efficacy. The distribution of power within the feudal state was therefore decisive in determining whether it was the king or the princes, the peers, who proved capable of creating the modern state founded on a taxation system using money, civil defense, and a professional army. At the time, of course, there were good reasons for the differences in the way that power was distributed. Today, these differences appear to us as somewhat accidental. Modern living nations do not much concern themselves with the fact that there were good reasons for political structures that today do not accord with their needs to emerge centuries ago in a particular form. It is no wonder, then, that the 19th century experienced a violent transformation of the traditional state system during the period of nation-state formation. Right. So it's these the particularities of national history and the development of the nation that gives rise to particular content that the economic development within that nation is situated, that is more or less beneficial to the development of capital within that nation state, which then then the nation state in the context of capital becomes the prevailing form, and we sort of look back and we're like, well, that's just like accidents of history or whatever. It's a little more this, a little more that, or whatever. But at the moment of development, it appears as far more important and determinative of social life.
Well, in order for the universal to actually become concrete, it has to manifest in the particular.
That's right.